When we think about exploring the absolute frontiers of the unknown, our minds almost automatically drift upward.
Right, yeah. We look to the sky.
Exactly. We think about the rover on Mars, or, we think about mapping distant exoplanets, launching the next generation of space telescopes. But consider this for a second. We have visually seen, actually illuminated and laid human eyes on a mere 0.001% of the deep sea floor.
Wow. It's just a fraction of a single percent.
It really is. And yet that pitch black, crushing, mysterious space makes up 95% of our planet's habitable volume.
I mean, that stat just forces a total recalibration of how we view our world, doesn't it?
Completely.
We spend our entire lives so completely fixated on the terrestrial surface, while the vast majority of the living, breathing space on Earth just remains entirely unseen. It's just operating in the dark.
Which is exactly why we are turning our focus downward today. So welcome to the deep dive. We are unpacking a really dense, incredibly fascinating stack of materials today.
Yeah, we really are.
And specifically, this is drawn from the Global Maritime Accord Academy's webinar number 7. This was a joint collaboration between the Liechtenstein Institute for Strategic Development, LISD, and SAMDES, India.
Right, and the insights from that session are just mind-blowing.
They really are. We're looking at the research from a powerhouse lineup here. We've got Professor Lisa Levin, Amber Fatima, Professor Mesheni Nantiba, Vice Admiral Ben Beckering, Peter Droege, and Admiral Dowen. And, our mission today for you listening is to map out this severe disconnect.
The disconnect between our reliance on the oceans and our negligence, right?
Exactly. Our absolute reliance on the oceans for survival and just the profound negligence with which we treat them.
We're going to trace the mechanics of this relationship.
Yeah.
Like going from the bizarre, high-pressure biology of the deep abyssal plains right up the river systems into the municipal infrastructure of our coastal cities.
Because it is incredibly easy to treat the ocean as an abstraction, like a blue expanse on a map.
Or just a nice backdrop for a vacation.
Right. But the reality found in these sources is that the ocean is the central engine of the planet. I mean, everything from the geopolitical stability of international trade routes to the literal weather patterns forming outside your window right now, all of it is governed by what happens beneath those waves.
Absolutely. And I think we should start with that planetary engine concept, because to really understand the stakes here, we have to go deep.
Let's do it.
Peter Droege lays out a fact about the Earth's energy balance that honestly completely reframes the entire climate conversation.
Okay, let's unpack that. What's the stat?
Well, when we talk about global warming, we mostly talk about atmospheric heating, right? We talk about heat waves, surface temperatures.
Yeah, exactly. The stuff we can feel.
Right. But Droege points out that atmospheric heating represents only 1% of the excess energy our planet has actually absorbed.
Wait, only 1%?
Just 1%. The oceans have absorbed roughly 90% of it.
That is insane. I mean, the scale of that is hard to even picture.
It is. And it's all down to the specific heat capacity of water in action. Water is incredibly dense. It requires vastly more thermal energy to raise its temperature compared to the air.
So the ocean is effectively the planet's heat sink.
Precisely. Without that massive thermal buffering capacity, the surface of the Earth, like where we live, would already be largely uninhabitable for us.
Wow. But the ocean doesn't just, passively swallow heat, right? It actively sequesters carbon, too.
Yes. And that process isn't just chemical. It is a highly biological process.
Which brings us to Professor Lisa Levin's work. Her research dives into the actual mechanics of the life forms that facilitate this ecosystem. And honestly, reading about these organisms is like reading field notes from another planet.
It really is alien. The biology is just wild.
We are talking about deep-sea creatures surviving in water surrounding hydrothermal vents that reaches 50 to 80 degrees Celsius.
Practically boiling.
Yeah, and they are thriving in highly acidic environments. We're talking a pH of 5, bathed in hydrogen sulfide.
Which is, that's highly toxic to almost all surface life.
Exactly. So the adaptations required to survive those conditions are just staggering.
You also have to consider the physics down there in the deep trenches. These animals are existing under 1,000 atmospheres of pressure.
Right.
At that level of compression, standard biological processes should just break down.
Yeah.
Theoretically, cell membranes should solidify into something resembling cold butter.
Ugh. What a mental image.
Right. And proteins should literally be crushed out of their functional shapes.
So, okay, how does a living cell not just collapse into mush under 1,000 atmospheres of pressure?
It's fascinating. They rely on these totally unique cellular mechanisms. They utilize specialized molecules called piezolites.
Racelites.
Yeah, and these molecules basically act like molecular scaffolding. They prevent water from being forced into the protein structures and unschooling them.
Oh, wow. So it literally holds them together.
Exactly. And on top of that, their cell membranes are packed with unsaturated fats to maintain fluidity in the freezing dark.
That is just brilliant biological engineering.
And it gets crazier. Furthermore, at those hydrothermal vents, you have entire food webs operating completely independently of sunlight.
Because it's pitch black down there.
Pitch black.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of photosynthesis, the foundational bacteria utilize chemosynthesis.
Mm-hmm.
They basically oxidize that toxic hydrogen sulfide to create organic material.
Okay, so they're turning poison into food.
Mm.
And because of the extreme cold in the broader abyssal plains and the sheer scarcity of food, most of which just falls slowly from the surface in what's known as marine snow, these creatures have to operate on an entirely different timescale.
Completely different pace of life.
Yeah. Levin points to the Greenland shark, which has this incredibly slow metabolism. And get this, it can live for 400 years.
400 years.
Yeah. And you have deep water corals and sponge reefs down there that have been growing millimeters at a time for literally millennia.
I mean, that longevity is a biological necessity. When food is that scarce and temperatures are near freezing,
Yeah.
you just cannot afford a fast metabolism.
Right, you'd burn out immediately.
Exactly. So these animals mature remarkably late in life and reproduce very slowly. But that exact superpower, their ancient slow-motion existence, is precisely what makes them uniquely unsuited to survive rapid industrial disruption.
Which brings us to the incoming bulldozer.
Unpack that for us.
Well, as the world attempts to transition away from fossil fuels, there's this massive push toward green energy, right? Electric vehicles, grid-scale batteries, huge solar arrays.
Which is generally a good thing, conceptually.
Conceptually, yes. But that transition requires metals, a lot of metals. And with terrestrial mines facing diminishing returns, plus all the geopolitical bottlenecks, corporations and states are targeting the deep ocean.
The new frontier.
Exactly. They want to mine the abyssal plains, the seamounts, and those exact hydrothermal vents for polymetallic nodules.
And just for context, these are potato-sized concretions of cobalt, copper, nickel, and manganese sitting right there on the seafloor.
Right, but we have to understand the timeline of those nodules. They don't just, magically appear overnight.
No, not at all.
They precipitate out of seawater over millions of years. They build up around a microscopic core, like a shark tooth, or just a tiny fragment of shell.
And they are the actual geological substrate that much of this ancient life anchors to.
Exactly. But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second, though.
Go for it.
If we are staring down the barrel of catastrophic climate change, right, and we desperately need cobalt and nickel to build the EV fleets and the battery grids required to finally get off fossil fuels, aren't we kind of trapped?
Feels like a trap, yeah.
Right. Isn't mining the deep sea just brutal geopolitical realism at this point? It seems like we're being asked to choose between sacrificing an unseen ecosystem or failing to stop atmospheric warming.
Yeah, and it is frequently pitched as exactly that kind of binary choice.
Yeah.
But the sources push back against that narrative hard.
So it's a false dichotomy.
Completely false dichotomy. Mining the deep sea to save the climate completely ignores the fact that the deep sea ecosystem is the climate regulator.
Yeah.
When you send these multi-ton continuous mining machines down to scrape the seafloor, you aren't just picking up rocks. You are pulverizing the upper layers of sediment. You're creating massive sediment plumes that can travel for hundreds of miles.
Basically suffocating the filter feeders, the corals, the sponges.
Suffocating everything.
Huh.
You are severely degrading the biological carbon pump.
And that's the mechanism that captures carbon, right?
Exactly. It's the very mechanism by which ocean life captures carbon and locks it away in the deep sediment. So, if you disrupt the carbon cycling of the deep ocean just to build car batteries, you are actively cannibalizing the planet's primary climate defense system.
Oh, wow. So it's literally like burning your house down to keep warm?
That is the perfect analogy. And the terrifying thing is, we are already seeing the biological fallout from this.
Like what?
Well, look at the scaly-foot snail.
Okay.
This is an incredible creature. It literally incorporates iron sulfides from the hydrothermal vents into its shell and its fleshy foot to act as armor.
So where's iron armor? That's so cool.
Well, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But it has now become the very first deep-sea animal to be placed on the IUCN Red List of threatened species.
Wait, the first one ever?
Yep, and not because of a predator, not because of some natural disease going around. It's listed because every single hydrothermal vent it calls home is currently blanketed by mining exploration contracts.
Wow, so its entire existence is just leased out.
Exactly. That snail is the canary in the coal mine for the deep ocean. The mutualistic interactions down there are highly specialized. If you wipe out the foundation of a vent ecosystem, the cascading collapse is absolute.
So we're essentially authorizing the demolition of the planetary engine room before we even possess the blueprints to understand how the machinery works.
Yes, that's exactly what we're doing.
Okay, so we are risking the deep sea ecosystem, basically the internal organs of the ocean for battery metals. But the ocean doesn't just suffer from what we scrape out at the bottom, right? It is actively being choked from the top down.
Oh, absolutely. The river systems.
Right. The rivers are the arteries of the planet, and right now we are diagnosing them with a severe case of vascular disease. We constantly hear the phrase ocean pollution in the media. But Amber Fatima's research insists that framing is a massive policy failure.
She argues it is an incredibly dangerous misnomer.
Why dangerous?
Well, when policymakers focus on the phrase ocean pollution,
Hmm?
all the capital, the public attention, the engineering, all of it goes toward the destination.
Ah, I see. So we end up designing these massive nets to drag through the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Exactly. But Fatima brings the data, and it's sobering. 80% of marine plastic actually originates from terrestrial sources, from land.
So the ocean is just the victim, not the source. If we only focus on the plastic swirling out there in the high seas, we are basically treating a symptom while ignoring a deeply ingrained, localized system that just endlessly resupplies the trash.
Precisely. We have to map the mechanism of how this plastic actually reaches the water in the first place. It is a highly efficient land-to-ocean pipeline. The research highlights that just about 1,000 rivers globally account for roughly 80% of all riverine plastic entering the ocean.
Just 1,000 rivers.
Yeah. These rivers are acting like massive conveyor belts for municipal waste.
And Fatima points specifically to the Ganga, the Godavari, and the Krishna rivers in India as massive nodes in this network. And, we really have to think about the physical hydrology here to understand it.
Walk us through it.
So you have dense urban populations, right? Plus insufficient municipal waste infrastructure and immense volumes of single-use plastics. During the dry seasons, this waste just accumulates. It sits in storm drains, in dry riverbeds, on the streets, and then the monsoon hits.
Right. The flushing effect of a heavy monsoon is just astonishing. It completely overwhelms the terrestrial drainage systems. It picks up millions of tons of this accumulated terrestrial waste, channels it right into the river basins, and just blasts it directly into the coastal waters.
And you cannot solve that problem with a net on a boat in the middle of the Pacific.
No, it's impossible.
Right. Doing a beach cleanup without changing the upstream infrastructure is literally like trying to mop a flooded bathroom while the bathtub faucet is still running on full blast. You will literally be mopping for the rest of your life.
Which is exhausting just to think about.
So how do we actually turn off the tap? Because we can't just keep mopping.
Well, Fatima provides an incredibly grounded blueprint through the Swat Sagar project in India.
Okay.
What's vital about this initiative, and they mobilized 8,500 youth volunteers across 30 cities. In its second edition, by the way, is its strategic placement.
Where were they placed?
They are intercepting waste in the cities, in the drains and along the riverbanks before it becomes ocean pollution. And they successfully recovered over 5,000 bags of trash.
That's incredible.
It is. But Fatima is also very clear-eyed about the limitations of terrestrial activism.
Right, because even urban cleanups can become a treadmill. Like you clear a ravine on a Saturday, and by the next Friday, it's choked with new plastic bags and wrappers.
Exactly. You haven't stopped the source. And this is where we really have to look at the systemic bottlenecks. To break the treadmill, Fatima outlines two absolute prerequisites.
What's the first one?
The first is transitioning from top-down mobilization to hyper-local ownership.
Meaning what, exactly?
Well, when a municipality or an NGO just busses people in for a photo op cleanup, the local behavior remains completely unchanged. But when a neighborhood takes direct civic ownership of their specific drainage system, the cultural norms actually shift. Source segregation of waste becomes normalized.
Okay, that local ownership makes total sense. But what about the physical infrastructure? Because, a neighborhood can segregate their waste perfectly, but if the city garbage truck just comes along, mixes it all up, and dumps it back into a massive, unmanaged landfill by the river, nothing has actually been solved?
That is the exact friction point.
Right. I imagine there is an entire invisible workforce in these cities already handling this material, completely unrecognized by global maritime laws.
You've hit on the most crucial and often overlooked gear in this entire machine, the informal waste sector.
Ah, the waste pickers.
Yes, millions of waste pickers
Wow.
globally are doing the heavy lifting of plastic interception every single day. But we have to understand their economics. They are highly efficient at recovering high-value plastics like PET water bottles.
Because they can sell those.
Exactly. But multi-layer plastics like the crinkly metallic bags used for potato chips or those little single-serving shampoo sachets, those have virtually zero resale value in the informal economy.
So they get left behind. They just blow around the street and eventually go into the river.
Exactly. So until municipal governments heavily integrate and subsidize this informal workforce, and until corporate extended producer responsibility laws force companies to stop producing zero-value, unrecyclable packaging, the faucet stays on.
It really paints a stark picture, doesn't it?
Very stark.
We have specialized scientists screaming that we are bulldozing the deep sea, and we have local activists proving that our municipal rivers are functioning as literal trash chutes. Which brings up the most glaring question of this entire analysis, really.
Why is this tolerated?
Yes. Why do billions of human beings, who are supposedly the most intelligent species on the planet, extract so recklessly and pollute so blindly?
It fundamentally comes down to a psychological and cultural void. Professor Makini Natiba identifies this phenomenon perfectly. He calls it sea blindness.
Sea blindness, that term is brilliant, and the historical anecdote he shares to ground it is just incredible.
Oh, the story about his uncle.
Yeah. He talks about his uncle, who grew up entirely landlocked in the Mount Kenya region. During World War II, his uncle was deployed to fight in Burma, and it was there, as a fully grown adult, that he saw the ocean for the very first time.
It is so hard for many of us to conceptualize that level of unfamiliarity,
Yeah.
just staring at the physical edge of the world with zero prior context.
Right, and because he didn't have the scientific context of lunar gravity or tides, he simply watched the water recede far out into the distance and then watched it come roaring back in with immense fury.
And what did he say when he got back?
He went back home and explained to his family that the sea had eaten, was satisfied, and came back.
I mean, it is a beautiful, deeply human attempt to make sense of a completely alien system. But Natiba uses that story to illustrate a really terrifying modern reality.
Yeah, so...
Because today, we have millions of people who are deeply embedded in a globalized economy, who essentially have the exact same level of understanding as his uncle did in the 1940s.
Wow.
We suffer from systemic sea blindness.
It's true. I mean, Natiba points out that even fundamental basic facts of the water cycle are completely absent from public consciousness.
Oh, totally.
The fact that the fresh rainwater irrigating the wheat fields in the American Midwest or filling the reservoirs in central India originated through oceanic evaporation that literally blows people's minds. They view the ocean as salt water, completely divorced from their fresh water supply.
And when you are blind to a system, you cannot perceive when it is collapsing under your own weight.
That's chilling.
Just look at the scale of our reliance. The sources note that 500 million people rely on small-scale fisheries for their primary livelihood and protein source.
500 million.
Yeah, and those small-scale local operations provide a staggering 40% of the total global fish catch.
But the industrialization of the other 60% is where the math gets genuinely scary. The data shows that in 1948, humanity extracted about 19.6 million metric tons of fish from the ocean.
19.6 million in 1948. And today...
Today, through the use of massive factory ships, deep-water trawlers, and sonar, we are pulling out over 92 million metric tons.
It's a staggering jump. We have scaled our extraction technology exponentially, but the biological reproduction rate of fish remains exactly the same as it was 10,000 years ago.
Right, they aren't breeding any faster just because we have better nets.
Exactly. We have slammed into the ceiling of the ocean's maximum sustainable yield. We are disrupting the food web from the top down. When you relentlessly harvest the apex predators, you trigger a trophic cascade.
That destabilizes the whole thing.
Yes. It destabilizes the entire ecosystem, leading to the collapse of the very fisheries those 500 million people depend on.
But, I want to push back on where the blame lies here.
Okay, let's hear it.
It is very easy to just say the public is ignorant, but if these realities, from the collapse of fisheries to the disruption of the deep-sea carbon pump, are so existentially dire, why aren't they common knowledge?
Fair question.
The scientific community has to take a massive share of the responsibility here. Why is the critical data that dictates human survival locked away in specialized academic journals behind massive paywalls written in impenetrable jargon?
You are hitting on a major structural flaw in modern science, and honestly, Professor Natiba entirely agrees with that critique.
Yeah.
He explicitly states that scientists must become better storytellers.
Yeah.
For decades, the culture of marine biology and oceanography just rewarded researchers for talking exclusively to each other. But data sitting on a server somewhere does not generate political will.
It has to penetrate the culture. It has to become something people talk about at the dinner table.
Precisely. Natiba argues that to cure sea blindness, we have to transition societies toward what he calls ocean literacy.
I like that. Ocean literacy.
If the scientific community wants the public to back massive policy shifts, like the international goal to protect 30% of the global oceans by 2030, they have to translate the mechanics of the ocean into terms that voters and local politicians actually understand.
So what does that systemic ocean literacy actually look like in practice?
Well, it requires embedding ocean dynamics into places they traditionally haven't been. It means teaching the biological carbon pump in elementary schools right alongside photosynthesis.
Make it foundational.
Right. It means economists must factor the depletion of natural marine capital into GDP calculations.
That would change everything.
It would. It also requires local weather forecasts to explain sea surface temperatures when predicting agricultural rainfall. People will not fight to protect what they do not value, and they cannot value what is invisible to them.
Well, let's look at the very sharp, very violent consequences of allowing that invisibility to continue. Because the sources make it clear that the failure to understand and protect marine ecosystems is no longer just an environmental tragedy. It is rapidly mutating into a hard geopolitical security crisis.
Oh, the causal link between ecological collapse and military conflict is becoming undeniable. Vice Admiral Ben Beckering provides a profound, ground-level observation of this dynamic.
What did he see?
Back in 2012, he was deployed off the coast of Puntland, Somalia, directly involved in international counter-piracy operations.
And the global media framing of Somali piracy at the time was entirely one-dimensional, right? It was presented as a purely criminal enterprise or just a subset of regional terrorism.
Exactly. That was the convenient narrative for nations trying to protect their shipping lanes. But when Vice Admiral Beckering actually sat down and spoke directly with the local clan leaders and elders on the coast, they explained the root cause. And it was entirely ecological.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they detailed how shifting weather patterns and severe changes in sea surface temperatures had utterly decimated their local fish stocks.
So the fish just migrated or died off, the local small-scale fisheries collapsed, and the regional economy evaporated overnight.
Exactly. You had thousands of skilled mariners who suddenly had no way to feed their families, living in a region with virtually no state capacity to support them.
Wow.
That ecological vacuum created extreme poverty, which was immediately weaponized by warlords and extremists. The rise of piracy was a direct adaptation to an environment that could no longer support its population.
It is a devastating chain reaction. The ocean warms, the ecosystem shifts, the economy crashes, and suddenly you have heavily armed speedboats hijacking international oil tankers.
It's all connected.
And Admiral Dawan expands on this heavily. He warns that the instability we've baked into the climate is now supercharging maritime friction globally. Because for a very long time, the high seas were generally treated as the common heritage of mankind.
Right. It was essentially a loosely governed space reliant on the freedom of navigation, a sort of gentleman's agreement that allowed globalized trade to flourish.
But as terrestrial resources dry up and climate impacts worsen, Dewan notes that the oceans are rapidly shifting from shared commons into highly contested military maneuver spaces. Nations are aggressively expanding their exclusive economic zones, they're building artificial islands, and ignoring established standards of innocent passage just to secure access to proteins and seabed minerals.
And the deep irony here, which Vice Admiral Beckering masterfully points out, is that while we are busy militarizing the water to fight each other, the water itself is turning against our coastal infrastructure.
The Dutch paradox.
Yes, he uses his own country, the Netherlands, to illustrate this incredible paradox.
And the Dutch are arguably the greatest hydrologic engineers in human history.
Without question. The Dutch water boards have spent the last 1,000 years building dikes, polders, and storm surge barriers to keep the ocean out of their low-lying country. It was entirely about defending against excess water.
Fighting the sea.
Exactly. But today, because climate disruption has so radically altered the ocean's regulatory power over the weather, the Netherlands is experiencing severe, sustained droughts.
Droughts in the Netherlands.
Yes. So those exact same engineers are now desperately trying to figure out how to keep fresh water in to prevent the salinization of their agricultural soil.
It is the ultimate symptom of sea blindness. We are out there squabbling over fishing rights and shipping lanes on the surface, completely ignoring the fact that the underlying physics of the ocean are breaking down and threatening our basic agricultural survival.
It's a harsh reality check.
So given this trajectory of militarization and ecological collapse, what is the actual governance response? Is it just the Wild West past the 200 nautical mile mark?
Well, it was for a long time, but there has been a monumental shift recently in international law.
Okay, some good news.
In June 2023, the UN finally adopted the High Seas Treaty, formerly known as BBNJ.
BBNJ, what does that stand for?
Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction. This is a massive legal framework designed to rein in the lawlessness of international waters.
How does it actually function mechanistically, though? Because international waters have always been a jurisdictional nightmare. Who enforces it?
So it introduces three crucial mechanisms. First, it establishes the legal framework to create vast marine protected areas on the high seas.
MPAs.
Right. Spaces where fishing and extraction can be strictly limited or entirely banned, allowing fish stocks to actually recover.
Okay, that's huge.
Second, it mandates rigorous environmental impact assessments for any new commercial activities. So if a company wants to start deep-sea mining for those polymetallic nodules we talked about earlier, they can no longer just drop a rig and start scraping. They have to scientifically prove the extent of their impact.
Good luck doing that without admitting you're destroying the carbon pump.
Exactly. And third, it ensures capacity building and the equitable sharing of marine genetic resources. Meaning wealthy nations can't just patent deep-sea biology and lock developing nations out of the benefits.
Okay, conceptually, BBNJ sounds like exactly what we need. But we really have to look at the reality of modern geopolitics.
Yeah, implementation is always the hard part.
Right. We are operating in a deeply fractured, hyperpolarized global landscape. Major powers are withdrawing from treaties, they're ignoring trade agreements, actively entering proxy conflicts. If BBNJ requires 100% global consensus to implement these protections, aren't we just dead in the water? I mean, how do you actually enforce a marine protected area if three superpowers just refuse to recognize it?
You've identified the exact trap that Vice Admiral Beckering warns against. He argues that in the realm of international maritime governance, aiming for full, unanimous inclusiveness often becomes the enemy of ambition.
Makes sense.
If you wait for all 190-plus member states of the UN to agree on the exact borders of a marine sanctuary, the ecosystem will be destroyed before the ink is dry.
So what is the pragmatic workaround? Because we can't just wait forever.
Beckering advocates heavily for what he terms coalitions of the willing.
Explain how that works in practice.
It is the strategy of regional, multilateral alliances moving forward independently. You don't need the entire world to agree. You just need the nations who share a specific waterway to align their interests.
Ah.
He points to the North Sea Summit as a prime example. The nations bordering the North Sea didn't wait for a global treaty. They formed a coalition to jointly manage their shared economic, ecological, and security interests. They're coordinating on offshore wind infrastructure and shipping regulations.
And the sources mention BIMSTEC doing similar work in the Bay of Bengal, right?
Exactly. The Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multisectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. That brings together South Asian and Southeast Asian nations to manage a highly complex, heavily trafficked marine environment.
What are they tackling?
They are addressing illegal fishing, plastic pollution, and disaster management regionally.
I love the pragmatism of that. Progress does not require perfection. If you have a shared river basin or a shared regional sea, you get the neighbors together, you establish the baseline protections, and you simply start executing.
Right.
You build local momentum that eventually scales up to international norms.
It is the only viable path forward when the clock is ticking on these ecological tipping points.
We have mapped out an immense amount of territory today. We started in the absolute extreme environments of the deep sea, looking at 400-year-old sharks, extreme pressure biology, and the critical biological carbon pump that regulates our atmospheric temperature, all of which we are blindly threatening with abyssal mining for battery metals.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground, or water. And then we traced the hydrology of our own terrestrial waste, examining how urban plastic flows down the rivers, proving that ocean pollution is actually a profound failure of land management and municipal infrastructure. We highlighted the indispensable yet incredibly undervalued role of the informal waste sector.
We confronted the psychological reality of our own sea blindness. We acknowledged that we are extracting over 92 million metric tons of life from the ocean annually, pushing the system to its absolute biological limit while remaining fundamentally ignorant of how the system operates.
And we follow the geopolitical consequences of that blindness, seeing how ecological collapse directly fuels piracy and regional instability, turning the oceans into contested military zones. But we also found a pragmatic roadmap forward through the BB&J Treaty and regional coalitions of the willing.
The central, undeniable through line of all this research is that ocean health is not some fringe boutique environmental cause. It is the absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite for human survival and geopolitical stability on this planet.
For you listening, the paradigm shift is understanding that the ocean is not out there. Every single breath you take, the rain that waters the agriculture you eat, the baseline climate you rely on to live it, is all governed by a massive, interconnected hydrologic engine.
Everything is connected.
For too long, humanity has treated that engine as an out-of-sight garbage disposal and an infinite resource mine. We simply cannot afford the luxury of that disconnect anymore.
I want to leave you with one final, incredibly provocative thought, directly inspired by Peter Druge from the LISD materials today. Later today, look at a globe, or, pull up a map on your phone. Really look at it. 70% of that surface area is covered in water.
Right.
We have spent the entirety of our history as a species calling our home planet Earth, but given everything we have unpacked today about who really controls the thermal balance, who drives the weather, and who sustains life here, maybe it's time we fundamentally rebrand it. What if we started calling it Planet Ocean?
It completely inverts your perspective on where we actually live.
It does. How would waking up on Planet Ocean change the way you interact with your local environment every single day? It's something to really think about the next time you toss a piece of plastic or just step it outside and feel a shift in the weather. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.